Redditors with unstable exes. What's the craziest thing they did after you guys broke up? Mother fricker confessed to me that he poked holes in the condom the very last time we had devil tango in an attempt to get me pregnant. He knew that our relationship was falling apart and thought that was the way to keep me around. He even went to my family's house to convince them to be on his side. He was stupid enough to think I would take him back for telling me the truth. I didn't end up pregnant with his kid. Thank God. Story 2. This happened to my brother's fiancée, Kim. A few years before Kim met my brother, she started dating this guy named Paul. They were both about 23 years old. Paul was an eccentric, moody, introverted but apparently charming jazz guitar player whose father was a very wealthy banker type, so Paul really had zero financial worries. He also had spent his senior year of high school in and out of a mental hospital for depression, anxiety, or something along those lines. Despite being very good-looking, Kim was his first girlfriend. Right away he was pretty much obsessed with her for the 1 year they dated. He would stalk her when she went to her college classes at a campus 40 miles from where he lived, would call up her friends whom he'd never met, and ask where she was, etc., etc. He started out pretty subtle about this and was able to hide it for a while, but eventually Kim couldn't. Increasingly his creepy behavior and erratic mood swings. It broke her heart to do so, but she had to break up with him. The guy did not take this well at all, had some sort of mental breakdown. At 2 a.m. a few days after the breakup, he showed up at her parents' house where she lived with a knife and threatened to slit his own throat on her doorstep. Kim talked him down and he apparently realized that he was acting insane and left, promising not to scare her again. In spite of all this, Kim still kept in contact with him to make sure he was doing all right. He apparently got much better after a couple weeks and moved out of state to live with his old friends, bandmates. About 6 weeks passes, she doesn't hear from him. Around this time she comes home and notices an unpleasant smell outside her house. Another day or two passes and the smell intensifies. Her father, investigating under the crawl space of the house, finds Paul's decaying body underneath the house. He had apparently crawled directly under her bedroom and overdosed on some sort of prescription meds. What's worse is that the body contained a suicide note addressed to Kim. I haven't been told what it said, but I don't think I want to know. Story 3. Walked 3 miles to my house with a pot of mac and cheese because her parents took away her car for being crazy and stalking me. After I didn't come outside, she started banging pots and pans together, flinging mac and cheese everywhere. Then hurt herself. Fricking insane. Edit, for those asking, yes, she lived. Another minor detail that adds to the crazy was that she actually lived about 20 miles away from me. So she became friends with a girl, the house she walked 3 miles from, and stayed over at her house in order to get within striking distance. So this was planned for over a month. Story 4. During college I went on one date with a girl I'd met in line at the bookstore. It was a nice dinner followed by drinks at the bar, and the night ended at her place. I thought I legitimately liked her. The next evening she called to ask if we could hang out, but I had a birthday party to attend with a bunch of guy friends and wouldn't be available. She showed up at the bar we were at and I chatted for a minute but explained I was spending time with the guys and would call her some other time. She seemed agitated. The party moved on and I started getting texts from her every 10 minutes for the rest of the night. I responded to none of them, and they got progressively angrier. You should ditch your friend, Sui. Are you being such a jerk tonight? Frick you asshole, I swear I'm not crazy. I'm sorry, high life beer guy. Come over and I'll make it up to you, frick you. Etc. etc. The next morning I had received a total of 24 text messages, 8 calls, 10 AIM messages, 2 Facebook's messages, and 1 long email trying to explain herself. I saw her in passing several times through the rest of college. She usually gave me an angry glare. TLDR clinger alert. Story 5. I was my ex's emergency contact. He broke up with me in August, and having been dumped I stopped taking his calls and answering his texts. This went on for a month and a half. In early October I got a call from the hospital saying they needed me to come in as I was his emergency contact. He was a delivery driver for a restaurant and got hit by a car. Thankfully he was just scratched and bruised but nothing major. We checked out and I dropped him off at home. As he's getting out of the car he says, "I'm glad you came. I didn't know what else to do to finally get you to talk to me again." I was livid. I told him to get out. Story 6. She texted me one day and told me she didn't want to be together anymore and that she wanted to go back with her ex. She was kinda controlling girl anyway and I didn't mind. But 2 days later she told me she wasn't on birth control while we were seeing each other and she lied so she could try to have a kid with me. She just wanted a kid, so I was basically sperm to her. My 19-year-old self was freaking the frick out for a few weeks and imagining a terrible life of poopy job and a horrible baby mama situation. Luckily she wasn't pregnant and she kept begging me to come frick her like 3 times in a month. I said no thanks every time and she ended up getting pregnant by some other guy. I just laugh every time I think about her really dumb life. Story 7. Earlier this year a buddy of mine was contacted by a local police department. Apparently the ex-BF of his new, for at least a year, girlfriend had put a hit out on the girlfriend, her family, and the new boyfriend. To make it worse, the ex-BF is an attorney and had hired a client of his that had been acquitted of murder in 2008. Story 8. This has been a long time coming. All the same guy and all in a matter of a couple months. Not necessarily the right order. Broke into my second-story apartment. Broke down my bedroom door. Stole my dog and threatened to drop her off in a field if I didn't leave my work friends I was hanging out with after a shift just ended. Proposed to me, even though I had mentioned for years I was not ready for marriage and wouldn't even consider it until I was done with college. Oh, the ring he used was his mom's old engagement ring. Cute. Except for the fact that his parents got divorced and hated each other. Oh, and we weren't even dating. Stole my camera and MacBook Pro, never got back. Hundreds of calls and emails and threats. Saw me at PetSmart with a guy friend when we were in the car leaving and he followed us miles into town. I had my friend drop me off and was trying to book it into work, but my ex ran after me, which led to a huge fight right in public, so embarrassing. Came to my apartment and I met him outside with my dog to get my keys that he stole when he broke in one time. He started screaming at me and physically hurting me. I tried to call 911 and he took my phone and smashed it into the ground. I got away and ran for help. Decided it was time to file a police report to start building up for a restraining order. I know, should have been sooner. I had a smashed phone, bruises, and the parking lot had cameras. He denied everything, lying to the cop. Got mad at me that he might lose his job over it. He worked in a nursing home. I sure hope he lost his job. Continued to call me and my mother at times for years after we broke up. I never once answered a call, text, or email from him during those times. Drove 2 hours to my new college and sat outside one of my classes waiting for me to catch me. I had made a guy friend in the class who took the same bus route as me, so we would chat on the bus on the way home. My ex saw me walking out with him and started laying on his car horn screaming at me. I heard through an old friend that he now dates someone that looks just like me. Creepy. Phew. That's the first time I've really talked about it, told anyone, other than my now husband when we started dating shortly after all that mess. I'm sure I'm leaving out a lot, but I don't want to dig into my memories too much. Story 9. I broke up with her and she said that she didn't want me around the apartment I was mostly paying for. I told her I needed access to my belongings and so I would need to come into the apartment to get them. She flips out and starts trying to wrench my keys out of my pocket and hitting me. When this proves fruitless, she physically blocks the door to the room I am in and doesn't let me out. I try to squeeze by her without pushing too hard. She starts slapping and scratching me. I get tired of this and threaten to call the cops. I dial and she finally gets out of the way. Unfortunately, the cops had to come anyway because it was a domestic dispute and instantly start trying to drag me out of my own apartment. I had to inform them that it was actually me that called and not the sobbing girl, because she had become abusive and I wasn't going to get physical with her. Story 10. Dated a guy my senior year of high school who went to a different school. I was 18 and he told me he was 17. I broke it off after I moved away to college. He ended up adding all of my new college friends I was making. He then proceeded to contact all of them to explain how he was 15 when we dated and I was a pedo who liked little boys. I called him and asked what the frick he was talking about and he explained that if I lost all my new friends and was having a miserable time, then I'd come back home and we would be together. Story 11. I can pick a few things out of the vast ocean of crazy that is my ex. She called 2 different jobs and proceeded to tell my boss that I was a bad person, crazy, unreliable, and I should be fired. She actually called one of my bosses about 40-something times in a row. She threw the top of a BBQ grill at me because I left to go to work. She threw gravel at my car after I didn't agree to her schedule. That's right, I got her pregnant. Now I am the custodial parent, BTW. She only sees the kiddo on the weekends. She threw a metal chair at my sliding glass doors. She got me arrested. This one takes some explanation. She was in a rage because I was going to drop off our child at her mom's. She had found out I was seeing someone else. This was many months after we'd broken up. I had stopped in the street in front of her mom's house to get some of the child's stuff out of the trunk. The kid is asleep in the back of the car, BTW. She pulls up behind, jumps out, and starts taking my girlfriend's stuff out of the trunk. She starts making fun of this girl, who she'd never met, for wearing makeup. She then slaps it off the back of my car into the snow on the side of the road. As I'm trying to pick it up, she kicks it. The bag opens, makeup goes flying all over the place. I start trying to pick it up, and she starts trying to kick it away from me. So I stand up and push her back. I push her on her sternum area. This was a mistake. She calls the cops, says I was abusing her, and I get to spend the night in jail. I could go on, but I think the picture is painted. Story 12. We were engaged 6 months from getting married. We'd been together 5 years. He started getting mean the last 2 years or so. We got into a fight and he decides it's the time to tell me he's been picking up random chicks at the bar and bringing them home to frick in our bed. This is while I was working too, sometimes 3 jobs to support him through school. When I told him that was it, I was leaving. I knew it was going to be bad. He locked me in our bedroom, no phone, he'd nailed the window shut. I spent a day in there before one of our friends stopped by and I was able to holler and get them to let me out. I had a couple of friends help me collect what few things I was taking as I was afraid to be alone with him. Most of my belongings were left behind. He would harass and scream and then beg and cry the 3 trips we made to move things. I was bartending back then and he'd show up and wait in the parking lot until I was off work. He tried to push me around, decked me a couple of times because I just wasn't listening to him trying to apologize. He'd follow me to my new apartment. I know he broke into my apartment at least twice while I was at work, left messages to let me know he'd been there. From the bar, I'd made friends with several of the county sheriff's officers as they would have to come break up bar fights quite often. I told them about it. They had a friendly talk with him one night when he was waiting for me outside the bar. I never saw him again. Story 13. Let's see. Kind of hard to pick the single craziest thing, but maybe we can do a short list. I was the head varsity cheer coach at my town's high school, and she called the athletic director with an anonymous tip that I was having devil's tango with several of the girls. Obviously I wasn't. I wouldn't even allow myself to be left alone with less than 3 of them, because even a rumor like that could ruin my life, career. She came over to my house to talk, read, yell at me and probably assault me, uninvited, and when I refused to come out and talk to her, she tried kicking in the door. When that proved to be an unsuccessful venture, she stormed back to her car, but not without first kicking my car and leaving a massive dent in the side of it. I watched her do this, yet she still denied having done it. She called the police to tell them that I was selling marijuana to high school kids. Of course I wasn't. I wasn't selling it to anyone, let alone high school kids, which would have endangered both my coaching job, and I was working as a substitute teacher for the school district at the time. She slashed her own goddamn tire and called the police to tell them that I had done it. Luckily I was verifiably out of town during the window of opportunity, so nothing came of it. We had a storage unit together, and during the breakup, she stole my key to it. Afterwards, she was holding my stuff for ransom until I met her ridiculous demands. I, of course, failed to do so, and she ended up either keeping, destroying, giving away, or selling all of my crap, which included a bunch of my books, DVDs, clothes, a nice expensive body piercing kit, and a ton of irreplaceable mementos. She messaged, harassed me on FB, then got upset because I wasn't being very nice to her and called the police on me for harassing her. She stalked my Reddit profile, created an account just to harass me here, then created another one to do more crap talking after she realized that the mods had done something to her account and I wasn't getting her messages. I reported her again and haven't heard anything from her since. Story 14. My ex walked into Thanksgiving dinner while my stepfather was putting the turkey on the table, demanded to know if I was sleeping with the girl that was there. She then tried to steal my phone and after 10 more minutes of her screaming obscenities proceeded to steal my bed. I mean, she literally took my mattress and box spring through the house, brought them out on the front lawn. She quickly realized that her Honda Civic wasn't going to be able to transport my mattress and box spring. So she took the only reasonable course of action and proceeded to stand on them so that I couldn't get them back. She made a phone call and a few minutes later her sister showed up with a truck. She screamed, "Have fun fricking on the floor," loaded my bed into the truck, then got in her car and left. That was 2 years ago. I'm still with the other girl and I did indeed enjoy fricking her on the floor. Story 15. A week after I had kicked her out, she walked into my apartment drunk as hell with her new boyfriend and a couple of his friends at 3 a.m. Guess she still had a key. I jumped out of bed, ran into the living room and asked her what the frick she was doing there. Her new boyfriend got in my face saying she and I were in a common law marriage because we had lived together for so long, and they were too drunk to drive back home. So they were gonna sleep in the living room. I threatened to call the police, voices got raised. My ex finally said that they'd be more comfortable sleeping in their car outside. I went back to bed where a new girl was still naked and confused. Story 16. After a turbulent amount of emotional abuse, I finally had the balls to break it off and moved back to my hometown, hundreds of miles away. She kept on messaging me, telling me she needed me and that she had hurt herself because of it. Me being an ex-suicidal case took this serious and tried to help her with it. 5 minutes later it was outed as a lie. And another 5 minutes later I got an email with a picture of her wrist that was cut. Took a full 180 and removed her from my life permanently. Story 17. When I was 21, 22-ish, I dated a party girl for a stint. We both liked drinking and were young, so it fit. She was a lot younger at the time, too young to legally drink. But because of her friends, she could get into any bar we frequented at the time. I landed my first full-time career-related job and had to back off the boozing a lot. Waking up at 8 a.m. after partying to 4 divided by 5 a.m. was causing issues, as expected. And she didn't understand that. Jewish American princess hadn't worked a day in her life. Initially, I just kinda cooled the whole situation down and started reducing the amount of time we were spending together. She would call me up at 3 in the morning with the "I'm coming over" call, and the devil's tango was great, so I'd leave the door unlocked. I am a weak man. One night she came over unannounced this time and proceeded to climb into my bed. Her bag of coke that she forgot about fell out of her bra and landed on my chest. She'd promised me she'd quit doing that crap months ago. I poured it in the toilet and told her in the morning when she left never to come back. She proceeded to infiltrate my circle of friends. No matter where I went, if I wasn't alone, there she was. She would try to come back to my place every time. She would find out what girl I was dating and threaten them. She'd drunk dial me multiple times a night. She'd get my friends to MySpace and Facebook stalk me so she knew everything that was going on and would casually text or call me mentioning it. Was creepy. The most amazing feat that I saw her accomplish with the goal of making me jealous was showing up to a bar I was at where a band was doing a show. I can't remember their names, it had girl in it. She managed to get on stage during their show and flip me off. That was fun explaining it to the girl I was with at the time. The night winds down and we're out front of the place waiting for a few of our friends, and here she comes smiling ear to ear. She then comes up and tries to kiss me. I dodge that crap like I'm getting paid for it, and this pissed her off. She then proceeds to inform me how she just got off the band's private bus and how she fricked or blew every single member. Story 18. I left a work meeting early one day because I had an eye doctor's appointment. He found out about it and showed up at my house with a pregnancy test yelling about how I'm keeping his child from him. He didn't believe I went to the eye doctor. He thought I was at an OB or something. He wanted me to take the test, but he wanted to be in the room when I took it so that he knew I didn't fake it. I called him crazy and told him to leave. He told me he was going to call the cops on me and have me arrested for slander. And then he told me he was going to get a copy of my medical records from the police station. I moved away and he started telling everyone I died. He said that I killed myself after I miscarried our child. I found a listing on Craigslist casual encounters under women seeking women that said the person was a female that wanted pics of other girls. That's fine, except for the picture used was one of me, in my underwear, at the ripe age of 16. I confronted him about it, since the picture had only gone to him. And he said that it was super easy to intercept pics like that and someone probably stole it to be a creep and get pics from girls. He said that since he's so good at it that he can have them take it down. He claimed to crash all of Craigslist and tracked the IP of the poster to a small town about 45 minutes away from where I used to live. I don't know anyone who lives in that town. Also, throughout our relationship, he maintained a lie that he was schizophrenic and had two other personalities. One was a jester named Shako, and yes, he played LOL at the time, and another was a werewolf named Edwick. To summon either of them, I could just say hat trick and they would pop up. Just like that. Story 19. Destroyed everything in my house, bruised herself up, went to the police station, told cops I beat her. My parents were on vacation in Alaska, so I had no one to bail me out. Fortunately, my friends put together some money and got me out. I had to go to a 6-month domestic violence class, with people who look like they really beat the crap out of their wives. They had pictures on the wall of women with their noses broken, black eyes, and bloodied up. Whole thing cost me a ton of money, but my case was thrown out and I was given custody of my son. Story 20. Dated Czech girl only for a few months, broke up with her. Few weeks later she shows up at a party, grabs me by the neck, points a gun at my head and keeps shouting profanities in her language. Oh, and I once saw her throw a guy 3 meters through the air. Probably should have taken that as a warning sign. Story 21. Drove to my mom's house, it was summer during college so I was staying there, and stood in the driveway and screamed for half an hour. There was a block party happening at the time. Different one met a drug dealer, got hooked on pills and became his kept woman for a while. But she left him, cleaned up and went through had a baby and got married unhappily. A baby and an unhappy marriage is about on par for your early 30 seconds, I reckon. Edit, just checked FB, they got divorced and are fighting for custody. Even more on par for the early 30 seconds. Story 22. I was the unstable ex. She was my first relationship, then she dumped me after a few weeks by telling me she was having feelings for another girl. I went full neckbeard, and basically spent the next year trying futilely to win her back. Then she started dating my male friend, which didn't help matters at all. High school, kids. Story 23. Stalked the new guy I was dating, then stalked me. Showed up to my house at 7 a.m. I worked second shift, over a week straight. Forced his way into my apartment and gave me a speech about why I shouldn't date the new guy and should date him instead, again. Followed new guy to my place from his favorite bar, left a dozen roses by my door that night. Showed up to my apartment after being told by police to stop. I called the cops. He tells them everything he owns that I have, as it was given to me at the time of the breakup. He eventually admits they were gifts, but all he wants is the dog's flea shampoo.